Lieutenant Naomi Park braced herself against the acceleration harness as the transport ship lurched through the planet's upper atmosphere. Outside the cockpit glass, a swirl of storm clouds parted to reveal the bruised horizon of Scion 4, a remote world renowned for its violent weather and unpredictable climate. Yet the turbulence barely registered to Naomi. Her senses were still half submerged in the residual hum of the neural implants used in the state-of-the-art training simulations. Only an hour ago she had been fully immersed in a virtual war zone, honing her mind and reflexes against the most advanced tactical challenges imaginable. Across the central aisle, Captain Elias Reyes gave her a knowing nod. The training regimen they'd endured was like nothing anyone had experienced a decade ago. It was developed by the best minds in neuroengineering, combining sophisticated motion tracking suits with direct neural feedback loops. Their bodies and minds learned in a fraction of the time it took conventional forces. It was no shortcut, however. Each quantum shift in skill came at a price: disorientation, sleepless nights, and an ever-building tension that they couldn't fully shake. They'd push through it, though. It was rumored that the difference between the average soldier and them was measured in galaxies rather than just skill. Naomi's hands clenched the support rail as the ship rocked again, buffeted by wind shear. The rest of the squad, strapped into jump seats lining the bulkhead, seemed equally uneasy. Not because of the turbulence. No, that was routine. It was the mission. After hundreds of hours in that hyper-immersive virtual environment, they were about to test their carefully engineered, borderline superhuman reflexes in a live-fire scenario. A hostile militia had taken control of the planet's orbital elevator, cutting off supply routes not just for Scion 4, but for the surrounding colony worlds. The militia called itself the Scion Freedoms. Their moral compass was questionable at best, but they were well pleased and deeply entrenched. Traditional forces had failed to dislodge them. That's why Naomi's squad had been called up. 1,000 swirling thoughts fluttered through her mind, simulations overlaying reality, the memory of endless battles replaying behind her eyelids. Each time she blinked, images flashed by of corridors, ambushes, vantage points. In training, she'd felt like a lightning bolt incarnate, anticipating enemy moves with uncanny accuracy. Now, she wondered how close those simulations would match real bullets and real chaos. Their success would justify all the investment poured into them, the neural implants, the high-fidelity VR, and the unrelenting pressure to become more than human. Sergeant Marcus Delgado finished checking his sidearm for the 5th time since they began descent. Despite the advanced rifles and multi-spectrum visors their squad carried, he still liked to keep his sidearm close. In the simulations, all weapons had their place, and you could never be certain which tool would best fit a moment of unpredictability. Naomi cast him a sidelong glance, recalling how Delgado was often the best shot of the team. He'd outperformed the entire squad in the VR killhouse, landing headshots at distances that left instructors speechless. He felt her gaze and gave a faint grin. They both knew the stakes. If they succeeded, it might open new frontiers for humanity's defensive capabilities. If they failed, it would prove that all the fancy technology was just that, fancy illusions. The question that too many had asked persisted. How would a soldier's mind hold up when thousands of training scenarios had all blurred into mental muscle memory? Could they adapt to sudden changes, unaccounted for in any program? A cool female voice sounded over the cabin speaker system. Approach vector locked. Touchdown in 90 seconds. Prepare for immediate deployment. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. The flight crew had the standard warnings, but for a moment her mind drifted back to the labs on Earth, where she and her squad had spent countless weeks strapped into neural chairs. The VR environments had included countless scenarios of infiltration, defense, negotiation standoffs, and rapid exfiltrations. She recalled the weightless sensation of moving through digital corridors. Reality overlapped with simulation. Her consciousness danced between the two as pinpricks of excitement surged through her body. 90 seconds until the real test. The transport's engines shifted pitch as it leveled off near the surface. With a final lurch, it dropped onto the designated landing zone. The loading ramp lowered, revealing a scorched plateau lit by the fiery glow of the setting sun. The wind battered them viciously and the stench of burned ozone filled the pressurized cabin. Naomi steadied herself. This corner of Scion 4 was an abandoned mining site, chosen presumably for minimal civilian interference, but it also meant they had no shelters or vantage points unless they moved quickly. Already, she felt the simulations running inside her mind's eye. Vector lines, cover points, angles of approach. "All right, people," Reyes barked. "We've done this 100 times in VR. Let's move." His voice was calm, authoritative, the product of decades of experience, some real, some artificially constructed. They rushed down the ramp, forming a staggered line. The moment Naomi's boots crunched against the ash-strewn ground, a swirl of data scrolled across her visor. This was her reality now. She turned swiftly, scanning for threats in rhythms that had been hammered into her muscle memory. Delgado at her left flank mirrored her movements. Neither needed to speak. The synergy was ingrained. They advanced through the desolate mining corridors, guided by real-time intel from overhead drones. The Scion Freedoms had a forward guard near an old supply depot. Recon suggested anti-personnel turrets, minefields, and a handful of well-trained hostiles. In earlier times, a normal squad would proceed with extreme caution, inching forward. Naomi and her team, however, approached with a bold confidence. High above them, diegetic signals from the VR training modules teased their senses, reminding them they had practiced this infiltration path in hundreds of permutations. They reached a half-collapsed industrial crane overlooking the supply depot. From this vantage, they could see the militia's red banners fluttering near the main structure. Guards patrolled with precision. Even in the failing light, Naomi's enhanced visor revealed them clearly. 8 figures armed with assault rifles, plus the remains of a mechanized turret. She gestured with 2 fingers, signaling Delgado to move left, while Captain Reyes and Corporal Atka circled around the right flank. She could practically hear the VR instructor in her mind. Identify weaknesses, exploit them swiftly, minimal casualties. The principle was burned into her neural pathways. Sergeant Delgado slipped into the shadows of the crane's base, moving with the kind of silence only hours upon hours of advanced stealth training could produce. Naomi moved parallel, scanning the lines of sight for any hidden watchers. Their approach was as if they had performed it before. Because, in a sense, they had. A guard near the perimeter paused, suspicious. Naomi tightened her grip on her rifle. One shot, suppressed, dropped him to the ground before an alarm could be raised. The guard's partner spun, searching their immediate surroundings, but Delgado's sidearm coughed once, and the second guard collapsed. With the perimeter compromised, the team initiated the second phase. Reyes moved first, storming the entrance to the depot. 2 more militia tried to duck behind crates, only to be met by the squad's unrelenting precision. But then a burst of unexpected fire hammered from the right. Naomi dove for cover, heart racing. The muzzle flash came from within the building, a narrow corridor hidden behind salvaged steel plates. This was not in the simulation. She felt the pang of disorientation that accompanied every mismatch between VR training and real-world variables. "Hard right corridor," she hissed into her comm. "Multiple hostiles." The hair on the back of her neck prickled. If these enemies had set up an impromptu kill zone, it would be dangerous. Yet her training told her exactly what to do. She pivoted, sliding into a half-kneel, returning fire. Bullets sparked off metal. The muzzle flash danced, and then, in a fluid motion reminiscent of her VR sessions, she vaulted over a barricade to flank them. Reyes and Delgado provided covering fire while Park dashed into position. Her heart hammered. Despite the difference in environment, the consistency of her training guided her body's movements. The squad neutralized the corridor threat, but not before one of them sustained a superficial wound. Corporal Atka clasped her left arm, which leaked blood. In times past, that might have rattled the entire team. Now, the synergy of VR training dictated that no one lingered in shock. Reyes signaled the medic to patch her up, while Delgado scouted ahead. Naomi quickly checked her rifle's ammunition. So far, they were living up to their near-superhuman reputation. Hours later, they huddled in the structure's upper levels, using it as a makeshift forward operating base. Night had fallen, but the swirling red dust carried by the planet's storms reflected the moonlight in eerie patterns. They'd cleared the militia's initial position with surgical efficiency, yet Naomi couldn't shake the tension that always hovered after a firefight. She leaned against a half-broken window frame, scanning the horizon. The real enemy fortress lay about 20 kilometers east, where the orbital elevator's base station loomed like a lonely monolith. That was their final objective. Sergeant Delgado rummaged through the supply crates, collecting explosives and extra ammunition. "We got what we came for," he muttered. "But something's off. They were prepared for more than standard infiltration. I think they expected someone with advanced training." Naomi nodded. Word traveled quickly, and if the Scion Freedoms had inside information about the VR squad, that meant the militia might have developed specific countermeasures. Captain Reyes joined them, consulting a holographic display that tracked real-time reconnaissance. The base station was bristling with heavy artillery and watchtowers. "We strike at dawn," he announced. "One push to sever the militia's hold on the orbital elevator. Command says additional units are on standby if we get pinned down, but we're the spearhead." His gaze flicked to Naomi. "We may have trained for it in the Sims, but the real opportunity has just arrived." They turned in for a brief rest period, rotating watch duty. Naomi found it hard to sleep. Even with the VR training, the adrenaline from the firefight coursed through her veins. She'd read the preliminary studies about how advanced VR immersion could lead to a heightened fight-or-flight response, insomnia, and mild dissociation from reality. But all those side effects were tolerated. Some might even consider them perks if they kept the mind sharp. Eventually, she dozed off, lulled by the low hum of the wind outside. In the darkness, her mind replayed the training simulations, half dream and half memory. She saw the labyrinth corridors, the endless waves of synthetic enemies she learned to dispatch with brutal efficiency, and the unyielding voices of instructors urging her to fight faster, smarter. Then, a shift in dream logic. She was charging down a corridor only to find it open into the real depot. She froze, uncertain which reality her mind was in. A swirl of dizziness overcame her. She waited for that comforting sense of control to return, but it never quite did. Just before dawn, the team awoke to swirling red dust devils outside. The partial sunrise painted the sky in a crimson hue that matched the planet's iron-laden sands. They shared energy rations, ensuring their neural and physical stamina would be enough for the day's operation. This, I know, that the sense of bleat compared to the wonders of Earth's fresh produce. These nutrient bars were meager, but they were scientifically tailored to maintain focus. Captain Reyes led them out. Recon drones had been dispatched overnight to map out the militia's defenses. At the center of their fortress stood the orbital elevator platform, an infrastructure with massive rotating arms designed to carry cargo off-world. Once they took the platform, Allied Navy transports could secure the system quickly. Still, the data showed multiple anti-air cannons, camouflage nets, and at least 3 squads of well-armed militiamen. The infiltration portion was more complicated than any scenario the VR labs had thrown at the team, but the fundamental principles still applied. Exploit angles, neutralize threats systematically, capitalize on the advanced reflexes they'd honed. They set out over the rough terrain, moving swiftly. The approach had to be stealthy until they reached the fortress perimeter. Naomi could feel her pulse flutter with anticipation. She was grateful for the empathic quiet that her squad maintained. No one cracked jokes or offered forced bravado. They understood the precariousness of their mission. One slip-up could turn them into sitting targets. VR training might have made them faster, more perceptive, but there was an underlying tension that no simulation could ease. This was life or death. When they reached the fortress outskirts, the squad split into 3 teams. Delgado and 2 others took the southwestern corner. Reyes and Corporal Atka circled north, while Naomi and the remaining 2 circled east. They planned a synchronized breach on all corners, designed to overwhelm the militia's ability to coordinate. The VR training had drilled them to act like a single multi-pronged unit. Each second counted. Naomi took a breath. She remembered the infiltration scenario from training, the sense of intangible readiness, the heightened perception. She felt she could sense the location of every threat. As they crouched behind a half-collapsed wall, waiting for the signal, the wind suddenly shifted, revealing a group of militia soldiers just inside the perimeter barrier. They carried heavier gear than the previous guards, likely a response to the earlier assault. Naomi signaled a silent countdown to her team. 3, 2, 1. When her shots rang out in the dim light, maze-like corridors and improvised barricades turned the fortress into a deadly labyrinth. Naomi's team pushed forward, methodically sweeping each sector. Gunfire lit up the dawn. Sparks flew from bullet impacts, ricocheting off metal plating. By the time Naomi leaped through a shattered archway, Delgado had already neutralized a pair of enemies from the other side. Every move felt choreographed, drawn from countless VR sessions. The synergy was unnerving in its flawless execution. But the militia fought with desperate tenacity, fueled by ideological fervor that no training simulation could fully replicate. They refused to break ranks, even as the squad's infiltration advanced deeper into the compound. Naomi found herself pinned behind a collapsed catwalk near one of the watchtowers. Tracer fire cut the air above her. She racked her mind for a VR scenario that had taught them how to handle continuous suppression from above. One vivid memory surfaced, a training module that combined grappling hooks and disorientation grenades to swiftly clear elevated positions. "Grapples out," Naomi ordered. She and her partner launched compact hooks to the watchtower's edge, then popped a pair of grenades to obscure the vantage. In a fluid leap, aided by the momentum of the grappling hook, Naomi soared upward. She landed on a narrow platform swirling with smoke. Disoriented militiamen stumbled, blinded by the residue of the grenades. She fired precisely, and 2 of them dropped. Her partner took out the rest. It was brutal, swift. As the smoke cleared, the watchtower was theirs. Naomi tried not to dwell on the reality of the bodies. Her training at times felt more like a dance than warfare, but it was warfare all the same. They pressed downward again, regrouping with Reyes and Delgado for the final assault on the stronghold's central building. The structure was imposing, with thick steel doors sealed tight from within. Anti-air cannons perched on the roof, scanning the skies for reinforcements. If the militia had a command center, it was here. Over the comm, Reyes announced, "Breaching charges are set on the west side. Planning a simultaneous entry from East Park. Can you confirm readiness?" Naomi glanced at her partner, who nodded. "We're in position, Captain," she replied. "Ready on your mark." A thunderous explosion shook the compound, rattling windows and sending a plume of debris skyward. That was the west side. Then Naomi's team rushed the east entrance, left unsecured by the defenders who'd been distracted by the blast. Like a calibrated machine, they charged in, rifles raised. The interior corridors were Spartan, barely lit by emergency lights. Enemy forces scrambled to respond, but the squad's momentum was overwhelming. They moved in unison, each soldier trusting the others to cover blind spots. At last, they reached a heavily guarded control room. The thick door hissed open under the pressure of well-placed charge inside. Red lights flashed ominously, highlighting a row of monitors that displayed the orbital elevator's status. Several militia officers stood around a console, armed but clearly panicked. Naomi felt a pang of conflict. She had been trained to eliminate threats, but not everyone in that room appeared ready to fight to the death. A few hands twitched in the air, a sign of potential surrender. "Stand down," Reyes called, weapon level. "This fortress is under Allied control." For a tense moment, it seemed uncertain whether the militia would keep fighting. Then one officer attempted to raise his pistol, but Delgado reacted faster than a coiled viper. In a flash, the officer lay sprawled on the floor. That was all it took for the rest to concede. As they raised their hands, Reyes gestured for them to kneel, while Naomi's team disarmed them. The immediate threat was over, but the thick atmosphere of tension remained. Was there a final trap? A last-ditch sabotage? The VR simulations had taught them to expect the unexpected. Naomi scanned the console, noticing an unusual indicator of power building in the orbital elevator system. She hurried over, fear jolting her. If the militia planned to scuttle the elevator, it could trigger a catastrophic meltdown that might destroy the entire facility. She frantically accessed the control panel, calling upon the VR modules that had walked her through infiltration and hacking. Her mind raced through overlays of what to do in emergency meltdown scenarios. She typed rapidly, disabling the sabotage program. A triumphant beep sounded. The meltdown was averted. Allied reinforcements arrived shortly after, the sunrise painting their ships in gold as they touched down. The fortress was secured, and the Scion Freedom's leaders were apprehended. A wave of relief passed through the squad. They'd won a crucial victory, and not just for Scion 4. They had vindicated the faith placed in their VR training. The whispered rumors of a specialized human force capable of turning the tide had just become fact. Still, as the dust settled, Naomi felt a flicker of uncertainty. In the back of her mind, the lines between simulation and reality had blurred. She walked among crates of confiscated weapons, hearing phantom echoes of her VR environment. She was sure the rest of the squad felt it too. Sergeant Delgado checked in with her, making sure she was steady. She forced a smile, but the adrenaline crash left her questioning how much of herself was still purely human and how much had become a living extension of the training system. Captain Reyes congratulated them, but his eyes held a similar concern. He read the same report she had. Advanced VR training could accelerate reflexes and hone instincts beyond normal limits, but it could also leave soldiers wrestling with a sense of detachment. The beep of a data tablet snapped Naomi out of her reflection. HQ wants a status update, Reyes murmured. They want to know about the success of the VR training in an actual combat environment. She could hear the subtext. The higher-ups needed confirmation that their investment paid off. They had pinned hopes and fortunes on creating the perfect soldier. Naomi prepared her report, listing the infiltration success, the minimal casualties, the speed and efficiency with which they seized the fortress. She included the team's expert maneuvers, their near-flawless synergy, and the way their advanced reflexes allowed them to adapt to unplanned variables. She ended with a cautious note. Thus far, no detrimental side effects have compromised the mission, was the official stance. Yet a small voice in her wondered about the future, about how her squad would integrate back into normal life, or how they would handle the next mission that might deviate radically from their carefully crafted simulations. For the moment, though, they were heroes. The ground crews cheered as the militia's colors were hauled down from the fortress walls. The commanding officer for the Allied forces saluted them, praising their legendary skill. Word would spread among the colonies and soon across the empire that a new breed of human soldier existed, trained beyond the limits of reality, unstoppable in the face of adversity. Naomi felt the weight of that expectation settling on her shoulders. If they were unstoppable now, what challenges lay in store? In the aftermath, they helped secure the elevator station. The battered platform soared into the atmosphere once more, carrying valuable resources for trade and supply to distant outposts. Freed from the militia's stranglehold, Scion 4's battered residents wept tears of gratitude. The dusty horizon was now dotted with emergency relief ships. Inside the fortress, the squad found pockets of imprisoned workers who had been forced to labor under the militia. Releasing them felt more satisfying than defeating any VR simulation boss or scoring record kills. This was the human element behind the metrics. It was the part none of them wanted to lose. As Naomi led these workers out, a young boy clutched her hand. He stared up at her with haunting curiosity. "Are you a machine?" he asked softly. His eyes were wide, reflecting all he had witnessed. Naomi knelt, momentarily speechless. "No," she said gently. "I'm just human." Like you? She wished she could explain that her abilities came from a new method of training, that humans could unlock extraordinary potentials when guided by technology. But the boy didn't need a lecture. She ruffled his hair, then guided him toward the relief medics. The question lingered in her mind. How human was she, really? Finally, she rejoined the squad. They stood in the courtyard, silent in victory. Captain Reyes clasped her on the shoulder, and for a moment, the tension eased. They were a unique band, forged through countless VR hours. Their senses felt too heightened, their eyes scanning every angle, even in relative safety. They had proven that training beyond reality was the edge that made them unbeatable. For now. Once the final sweep confirmed no further threats, the squad boarded a transport ship back to the capital city. The flight gave everyone a chance to decompress. Corporal Atka stared pensively out a window, her bandaged forearm resting on her lap. Delgado spoke softly with a pilot, likely discussing the next steps in the mission timeline. Captain Reyes began drafting a full after-action report on a data tablet. Naomi removed her visor, massaging the bridge of her nose. She couldn't wait to be rid of the neural implant's constant hum for at least a few hours. She gazed at the planet's swirling red dust below. Fragments of memory from the VR sessions drifted through her mind. There had been desert raids, city battles, zero-gravity assaults, some purely hypothetical, others modeled after historical conflicts. Knowing how deeply that training had shaped her made her uneasy. Yet she also understood that it had saved countless lives today. She remembered the shocked expressions of the militia who never expected such speed and precision. She recalled the boy's question, his awe at seeing them in action. Maybe it would inspire the next generation, though she hoped they'd find a path that required less violence. After a tense half-hour, the transport began its descent. The capital city's spaceport glimmered in the distance, gradually revealing orderly rows of hangars and concourses. They touched down, and the canopy rolled open to bright overhead lights. A throng of cameras and correspondents waited beyond the docking ramp. News of the squad's success had traveled faster than they had. Naomi steeled herself. The triumphant calls of reporters reached them. "Is it true you achieved victory with no casualties? Please, an interview. Just one question about the VR system." She could almost hear them salivating for dramatic headlines. A canny public relations officer ushered them through, avoiding direct contact with the cameras. The officer explained that a secure debriefing awaited them inside a high-tech command building. Freed of the press, they finally exhaled in relative privacy, stepping into a conference room where a panel of brass and scientists were assembled. Naomi recognized the top neural engineer who'd supervised their VR conditioning. He offered a stiff smile, no doubt eager to weigh every detail of their performance. Over the next hour, they recounted the mission in thorough detail. Commanders listened intently, leaning forward at the mention of advanced infiltration and near-flawless synergy. The neural engineer asked targeted questions about their mental states, checking for anomalies or errors. So far, none had manifested that would discredit the program. A small part of Naomi suppressed the uncomfortable truth that reality felt slightly unsteady sometimes, as if the training had taught her body to exist in multiple planes of possibility. She kept that to herself. "Your performance has justified our investment," concluded Admiral Tan, a grizzled figure who had commanded fleets on the frontier. "Civilian leaders are praising you as proof that humans can stand on equal ground with any threat in the galaxy. You'll be recognized with high honors, and the VR program, well, we'll expand it further. We can't ignore its success." Those words resonated across the briefing room. The squad exchanged glances, uncertain whether they should feel pride or apprehension. As they were dismissed, the neural engineer handed Naomi a data chip. "I have compiled your performance metrics along with updated modules for your next training rotation," he said. "We'll continue tweaking the system." Naomi nodded, slipping the chip into a pocket. Her next training rotation. The cycle continued. She knew that even after a successful mission, they wouldn't rest for long. The VR environment demanded consistent updates, deeper neural immersion to stay at the cutting edge. They would be tested again, maybe on a more dangerous battlefield. Later that evening, the squad was granted a rare reprieve. They wandered the capital city, a stark contrast to the battered landscapes of Scion 4. Tall spires, shimmering in neon lights, reached into the sky. Hover vehicles zipped along suspended highways. Pedestrians wore sleek, futuristic attire, unaware that heroes of the day moved among them. Some recognized the VR squad, but most just offered quick nods or curious stares. A lavish hotel suite was arranged for them, courtesy of the Allied Council. Each soldier had a private room. Naomi couldn't bring herself to indulge in the city's nightlife. Instead, she found herself on a rooftop balcony, gazing out at the metropolis. Thoughts swirled in her mind, the illusions of VR training designed to accelerate the evolution of the human soldier. She replayed each critical moment of the mission. Could they have accomplished the same feats without VR? Would they have been as synchronized, as fearless, or as efficient? Likely not. Yet she also questioned the cost. How deeply had this rewired her sense of self? A gentle breeze carried the faint hum of traffic from below. Naomi peered upward, where the planet's star glowed faintly behind the protective dome. This was the future, after all, a bustling world, sustained by technology and defended by soldiers made more than human. She often wondered what new breakthroughs lay ahead. Perhaps one day they'd harness technology to ensure no wars needed to be fought at all. But that felt naive in a universe that seemed perpetually on the brink of conflict. Footsteps approached. She glanced around to see Delgado, who held 2 cups of steaming tea. He offered one to her. "To calm the nerves," he said, in his quiet, steady manner. They stood side by side, silent for a while, sipping the warm liquid. The city lights danced in the reflection of Delgado's eyes, and Naomi suspected he shared her worries. Words were scarcely needed. They understood one another. Eventually, Delgado spoke, voice low. "You think we can keep doing this, pushing ourselves further each time?" There was no condemnation in his tone, just a subtle question of how far they could stretch the boundaries of their humanity. Naomi exhaled gently, thinking of how each VR session left her feeling more lethal, more detached. "I guess we'll find out," she said at last. He nodded, and they let the conversation fade. Behind them, the silhouette of the distant fortress they had conquered was barely visible, hidden by the city spires. Tomorrow, they might be deployed to another conflict zone, or summoned to Earth for a new round of neural calibrations. For tonight, though, they stood under the vast expanse of stars, living proof of humankind's capacity to adapt, to evolve. They were champions forged by illusions, made real only when tested under the fiery crucible of actual combat. And, for better or worse, they had become unbeatable.